Hi, everyone. I think it's worth going through the latest Netflix financials, also to understand a little bit of the business strategy that Netflix is actually going through. It's pretty interesting because this has been what I like to call and define in my newsletter as a Netflix post-traumatic growth, meaning that this year, the first quarter of 2022. There was like a wake-up call for Netflix to understand that in order to actually function at the scale that it reached now, so over 200 million members, it needed to a little bit change the playbook. So let's recap a little bit what's going on here. The whole thing started in Q1 2022 when Netflix subscribers slowed down. For the first time, actually in a decade, numbers were much worse. Meaning that the growth was slowing down for the first time in years. And this was a wake-up call of, again, what I like to call a post-traumatic growth, where finally the company had to change and actually to challenge its own assumptions of what worked so far for the company. Since especially Netflix has been a disruptive company, creating a whole new industry, which is the streaming, which now has become a consolidated market, then it becomes critical to understand what do you do when you're on top of it and actually when you're losing the dominance of this industry. What do you do? So it's a pretty interesting case to see how the executive team has been responding, interpreting this, and the whole changes that Netflix is making to its business model. Now, I covered on my blog and newsletter. I'm gonna point those out in the video notes. But pretty much I've been pointing out that in the first quarter of this year, as things slow down for Netflix, the executive team actually identified a few factors. So let's take into account the three main ones. One, of course, is an economic slowdown, meaning that, of course, as the economy is slowing down, we start to ask whether the Netflix business model is sustainable at this scale with this kind of economy. Though this is a factor that the company can, relatively control. There's another element which is about what I like to call a linear competition, meaning what's going on in the streaming market, and now other players have learned the playbook of Netflix, actually not only by copying it perfectly, but also by building their own competitive advantage on top of that playbook. And a key example of that is actually Disney, who has been able to bundle up many services together, doing successful acquisitions and expanding its streaming services in a very successful way. A third element, and most important, as we'll see, which has had really Netflix change its many assumptions, was the nonlinear competition, meaning that today we see a migration of attention, especially for the younger generations, from more traditional like platforms like streaming, which now we can call more traditional, not like 10 years back, but the market has changed in these last 10 years to a new platform, especially like TikTok and like YouTube, is the only probably video platform is able to keep up with the TikTok growth. Now, let's see what's going on right now. In this quarter, in the last release, actually numbers were way better than expected, meaning that finally in Q3, Netflix was back on track with passing 223 million subscribers, and this of course showed in the stock, who really jumped from 230 to almost like 280 in a single day, and those were like numbers that we didn't see in the stock for months. But behind that, it's really relevant to us right now that the pricing of the stock is not any investment advice. It's just like analysis of the company and the strategy to understand how the executive team is responding. So it's more like for managers or executives who want to understand what's the way to respond to such a threat and of the environment, but also coming from competitors, linear competitors, as we saw in the streaming industry, but also behind that, how attention is moving, how the consumer choices are changing. How do you keep track of all of that? Now, I think there are a few considerations to make based on the last release that really the Netflix executive team has realized. As the company is working with over 200 million members, at this point, of course, as you can imagine, the company is working at a different scale compared to the past. And this actually opened up a question in the previous months, where the company was thinking whether it made sense to still enable members to actually binge watch. I think it does for certain things, and as how the executive team has also understood from Netflix. For instance, they realized, as they actually announced in the last release, that a series like Squid Game would not be as successful if there was not like binge watching. And let's remember that that binge watching is like a trademark on Netflix, started in 2013 with House of Cards, and still today is one of the key elements which makes the platform so sticky and viral in the first place. Therefore, there is still a place of binge watching within the Netflix business model, but as we see, things are changing. So binge watching is a way to release content, is a way to distribute content, and it's also, if you wish, a marketing strategy. So it's distribution and marketing together. So changing the frame of how you distribute content through binge watching is extremely important, because it shows how Netflix is changing its business playbook. So we'll see more and more in the future Netflix like taking, enabling binge watching for some things and not for others. And I think we'll see this more and more as Netflix is going to transition to a not supported first, a business model where initially, as we'll see, we have a first tier which is much cheaper compared to the others, but I think over time Netflix is going to try to switch to a first tier which is completely free. Now, the interesting part of all of this is that Netflix is finally going behind the licensing model. I've been explaining this over and over again in my analysis of the Netflix business model on what I like to call actually the mediafication of the Netflix business model, meaning that over time the produced content is going to go way behind the license model. So right now Netflix is slowly moving away from the license model. Why? So the license model the license model is very effective. It has very important elements in its favor. And some of those are the fact that you get a much faster distribution, and you can actually expand the selection of movies or like TV series. So the content library much faster, and you get much less risk, because of course investing in original content is very, very risky, because it means that you are putting upfront the money and investment for this content, which is going to come much, much later, also years to come. So the licensing model works because it enables Netflix to expand its content library very, very quickly. However, it has some major limitation. Some of those are the slow and secondary distribution, meaning that there is a so-called pay one window model, where of course the company who license the content is the one that is going to distribute the content first. And therefore, if you're Netflix and you're getting content licensed by other parties, actually you had the chance to distribute it on top of Netflix like later on. Therefore, you're going to get just a partial advantage of having that content on your platform. There is another element which is about limited availability, meaning that if you license the content, you don't own the intellectual property, and therefore you're going to have availability of that content in your platform usually between like 18 to 24 months. That's why you see that in many cases the Netflix content library is very volatile. So you see titles that are coming and going, and that's because of the fact that those are licensed. So you don't have control over time over your content library, and this is very bad, especially if you're running a subscription-based business model, because you might lose subscribers if you don't have a wide variety of also content within the platform. And then there is a key element, which is another one which I like to call limited expandability. This is a key element of the three, is the most important. Why? Let me explain. When you especially the movie making industry, it's pretty much a power law industry where you get the winner take all effect, meaning that just like in the venture capital, where you hope that a few, actually one or two of the winner will pay off for the rest of the pack. Also, when it comes to movie making industry, it's the same logic. And there is an additional aspect to that. When you actually when you have a hit, when you have a movie that worked, you want to make sure that you keep reaping off the benefits from a financial standpoint of that content, because you get so a few hits that once you get one, you want to go all in. So you want to roll it up. You want to roll it out over and over again through like series, also by developing consumer products around this content, which is something that Netflix cannot do, actually can't do for its licensed content. So you understand why the licensed content is not just about content, it's about business modeling. It actually affects the whole way the content is distributed, sold, and how the company is able to grow its business model over time. So, as I explained over and over again, Netflix has been moving to original content. It was actually one of the first in 2013 with House of Cards, going forward. And now there is another point, which is about the fact that Netflix is moving away from licensing, but is also doubling down on original film production, which is a strategy that started in 2016, and now we see it in full force now. Why is this a different game changer compared also to series? Of course, TV series are a trademark of Netflix. However, if you're Netflix right now, you want to eat up into an established industry which wide margins, and you go into the Hollywood really turf. So that's what's going on. If you're Netflix, you're doubling down on film production, because of course, if you can have a hit, you can win the Oscars, and you can actually tap into an existing industry by expanding your business model at scale. So by moving behind the licensing model, of course, Netflix is actually getting fast and primary distribution, meaning it's going to be Netflix to decide how this content is going to get distributed first. It can do it also through like movies, through like theaters, or like directly on the platform, but it's a huge advantage. Second, it's limited, the content, the availability of the content, meaning that Netflix is not going to have an expiration date on its content. Therefore, it can have it on top of its library for years. And there is an additional point to that. Over time, as Netflix has distributed this content well on its platform, can decide also to license it to third parties platforms, and therefore also make money, keep making money on top of that content, and further distribute it to more and more people. And then there is the third element, which, as we saw, it's about expandability. Once you own the IP of the content, you can expand on top of it. You can make movie series. You can develop like consumer products and stuff like that. Let's consider now competition, how Netflix sees it, what's the strategy going forward, and why it's so interesting. Now, the Netflix team this year had a wake-up call, as we saw with the slowdown of subscriber base for the first time in years. And so it realized that it needed to change its own assumption. Therefore, the company took a few initiatives that are, to me, short-sighted yet useful in this market context, like account sharing. So the company realized that as millions of people, share their accounts with others, which is a thing that they knew since the onset. Right now, they're monetizing those accounts by enabling sub accounts, where if you're an account owner, you can enable other family and friends to use your Netflix, but you're gonna pay an additional fee on top of that. So it's a good move in this market context, because it shows that you can become way more efficient, and with a subscription business model at scale, you need to do it. So it's a great short-term move. But then on the other side, there is another radical change of the business model of Netflix. For decades, Netflix has been running with a simple subscription-based business model, and it's surprising actually that it managed to get so huge, so big with that simple model. Yet, with a company that now has reached over 200 million subscribers in a saturated market where there is more and more linear competition, and with the changing consumer adoption and attention moving to other platforms like TikTok, of course, if you're Netflix, you're challenging your own assumption. And therefore, Netflix has started to launch its ad-supported version, which is going to be a plan of $6.99 that is going to make the other is going to be way more competitive from a pricing standpoint. But let's take into account 3 points here, which are extremely important. First of all, the ad-supported tier is going to give Netflix visibility into the advertising space. So Netflix is not the master, doesn't know, really actually has never explored, or at least we know that in the past they did some experiments, but they don't know how the advertising market works. By launching the ad-supported version, they can learn. So they're going to go through a steep learning curve of understanding how the advertising market works for the streaming services and behind, so they can eat up into also more traditional advertising services like cable and stuff. And this is extremely important because it's gonna enable Netflix to understand how advertising work. A second element is that, of course, it's gonna enable users to have a more, an additional, reason to switch to the higher tier, which is if you don't want advertising, you can switch to the higher tier, and therefore it's going to reinforce a Netflix funnel. And the third element, I think this is just a transitional phase. So if you're Netflix, of course, you cannot launch right on a free advertising-based plan because it would be too risky. First, because you can actually cannibalize your own subscriber base, paid subscriber base. And then on the other side, also because you want to understand the dynamics of the advertising market first, meaning as you're able to roll and enroll more and more advertisers on top of your platform, actually, that's how you can monetize better and better, and that's how you can subsidize the platform for many more users, and therefore you get the chance to offer a free tier, which right now you can't. So this is a key element to understand. The ad-supported version right now, I think, is a transitional phase. Netflix is going through the curve, understanding the advertising market. As it expands, it's going to get more opportunity to offer the free version to people, to users, and therefore to actually become a billion user company. So get to the point where it has limited scale, if you wish, because it has 200 million subscribers, to get to like 1 billion potential users with a free tier. This is a key element. And then, of course, Netflix has been experimenting with the marketing campaigns at scale to make sure that it can leverage another platforms to actually create buds for its own series and content. And it has been doing this with the new fan event platform that actually has generated over 1 billion views in a single year. And then there is another element which is about gaming, where the company has been building the infrastructure to actually host games on top of Netflix. Right now, there are like 35 games. There will be 55 games in development. This is a key element as well, because gaming for the way Netflix sees gaming is like IP's content, meaning if a game is successful, as Netflix as a company, of course, it's not just you're going to attract more subscribers, but you're actually going to be able to develop content on top of it. So a successful game can become a TV series, can become a movie, can become merchandising, can become like consumer products. This is a key element. This is another key element to understand. So this is how Netflix is moving. Again, this is what I like to call Netflix post-traumatic growth. After the wake-up call of early this year, we saw Netflix like jumping back. And we right now, even if subscriber base is back, it's interesting to see that Netflix had to go through still transitional business model to enable scale. So right now, Netflix is moving away from a very simple subscription-based business model to a subsidized business model where it's going to be able to offer the platform for free in the future to more and more members, therefore potentially becoming a billion user company.